It was his birthday party, the kind that everyone had been talking about for weeks. Elegant, high class, and set in a mansion that looked like something straight out of a movie. I had dressed up, glammed up for him because I knew he liked to show me off to his friends. I did everything right. I had kept the house together, raised the kids, and supported his business, always making sure his image was flawless. But what did I get in return? As we entered the grand ballroom, I couldn't help but feel a little proud. There, in the midst of the beautiful decor, I stood by his side. The golden chandeliers reflected the twinkling of glasses, and the expensive music played softly in the background. My husband, Emeka, was surrounded by friends, associates, and people who couldn't wait to get a glimpse of the man who had it all: fame, wealth, a beautiful wife, and a perfect life. I wanted to enjoy the night. I really did. But the whispers in the air were already too loud. I could hear them, his colleagues, the way they looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Emeka was talking to his business partners, but there was a certain tension in his smile, as though he was distracted. A few hours passed, and the party was in full swing. Drinks flowed, and the music got louder. Suddenly, my worst nightmare came true. He did it in front of everyone. One moment, I was standing by the pool, sipping my drink, trying to laugh along with the crowd. The next, Emeka was there, and before I knew it, he had shoved me into the water. Right there in front of everyone. His birthday party turned into chaos as I struggled in the pool, my dress clinging to me, the water getting into my eyes. I could hear laughter, his friends' laughter, echoing around me. I looked up, stunned. There he was, grinning, thinking it was all just a joke. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. This was more than just a prank. This was the ultimate disrespect. He had humiliated me in front of everyone. And what he didn't know was that I was about to turn his world upside down. I stood up slowly, wiping the water from my eyes. I felt every eye on me, but this time it didn't matter. "You think you can just throw me into the pool like this?" I managed to say, my voice shaking with fury. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Emeka's face dropped. He looked around, but there was nothing he could say to smooth over what had just happened. The whole room went silent. People began to murmur, their eyes shifting between us. It was in that moment, dripping wet, standing in front of all these people, that I realized Emeka had no clue who I really was. He didn't know that I was the one who owned the mansion he was in, the mansion he thought was his. I had built everything he was showing off. Every single thing he thought he had worked for, I had provided for him. But he was too blinded by his ego, too distracted by his affair with other women, to even notice. Before I could say another word, I turned to the nearest door, still dripping, and walked out. I didn't care about the stares. I didn't care about the whispers. Emeka had pushed me too far. And little did he know, the real story was just beginning. Welcome to Stories by Anif. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family. I could feel my heart racing as I walked away from the mansion. The cool night air didn't even seem to soothe me as I stormed down the driveway. My mind was clouded with anger, but beneath the fury was something darker, something I had kept buried for too long: betrayal. Emeka had crossed a line that not even I could ignore anymore. I didn't bother looking back. In that moment, I wasn't even thinking about the party or the people inside. I didn't care about the people who had seen me humiliated. All I could think about was how Emeka had treated me all these years. How every time I turned a blind eye to his infidelity, to his disregard for me, he only got bolder. This time he had gone too far. I walked for a few minutes before I reached the car. My body was shaking, not from the cold, but from the storm inside me. I needed to get away, far away from all of it. I pulled out my phone, dialing the one number I knew I could trust. My best friend, Ngozi. She had been with me through thick and thin, and tonight, I needed her more than ever. Hello? Her voice came through the line, groggy but concerned. Ngozi, I need you right now, I said, my voice trembling. Emeka, he threw me into the pool tonight, in front of everyone, his friends, his colleagues, and they all laughed. I don't know what to do anymore. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. What? Ngozi's voice was thick with disbelief. That's too much, girl. What happened? He thinks he can get away with anything because of all the money, the status, and the mansion. Ngozi. I could hear my voice break, but I swallowed hard, refusing to let her hear me cry. What he doesn't know is that I own everything. The house, the cars, his so-called wealth. And tonight, I showed him what happens when you underestimate someone like me. Ngozi was silent for a moment. Then, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. You've been holding it all in, haven't you? All this time, trying to protect your family, protect his ego. But you've got to stand up for yourself now. You're not just some woman to be tossed around for his ego. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I've been so focused on holding everything together for everyone else. But he doesn't get to treat me like this anymore. I'm done. I'm coming over, she said, her tone resolute. We'll figure this out. Okay? Just stay strong. I hung up the phone, feeling a little lighter but still simmering with anger. As I sat in the car, I took a few deep breaths. What had I been waiting for all this time? A man who couldn't even respect me? And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Emeka think he had control. It was time to take back what was mine, and that meant exposing the truth. The world he thought he had built, his career, his reputation, was nothing without me. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Emeka wasn't the type of man to back down easily. I had to hit him where it hurt the most, and I had just the plan to do it. The next few days were a blur. I didn't speak to Emeka. I didn't even look at him. The mansion felt suffocating, and every corner of it reminded me of how I had built this life, only for him to tear it apart with his lies, infidelities, and disrespect. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The first thing I did was start gathering evidence. Little things that had been weighing on me for so long but that I'd ignored. It wasn't hard to find. I had been living in the shadows of his deceit for years. I knew exactly where to look. Emeka thought he was the one in control. But I knew better. He had no idea that I had been silently documenting his affair for months. The late-night calls that he thought I didn't notice. The strange woman's number I found in his phone, repeatedly showing up in his recent calls. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. He didn't realize that, while he was out trying to make a name for himself, I was the one holding all the cards. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat down in front of my laptop and started putting everything together. I had the pictures, the text messages, and the audio recordings of his late-night conversations. Everything was in place, and now it was time to act. I hadn't planned on taking him down so publicly, but after the pool incident, the way he humiliated me in front of everyone, I knew I had to make him pay. The mansion, the cars, the lifestyle, none of it would mean anything if I exposed his secret life. I decided to call in a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a lawyer I knew was sharp enough to deal with Emeka's arrogance. This would be my way of making sure he understood that I wasn't someone to be messed with. The next morning, I made the call. The lawyer, Chijioke, was everything I needed. He was calm, strategic, and knew exactly how to get under Emeka's skin. I trusted him immediately. I'm going to need everything, and I mean everything, he said on the phone when I explained the situation. It's time for Emeka to realize that no one gets away with mistreating you. I felt a flicker of relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in this fight. I wasn't going to let my husband continue to run over me. He had no idea what was coming. That night, I sat Emeka down. He was relaxed, still in his usual arrogant way, thinking everything was normal. But I wasn't fooled. I had already prepared the papers, everything signed and ready to go. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge he hadn't heard before. "About your birthday party." His face twisted, his expression faltering slightly. "What about it? I thought we moved past that." "Oh, we haven't," I said, standing up. "You've been keeping secrets from me, Emeka, and it's time I exposed everything." I reached for the folder on the table, pulled out the pictures, the texts, the recordings, and placed them on the table in front of him. "Do you recognize any of these?" I asked, watching him stiffen. His face turned pale. What is this?" His voice was shaky now, a stark contrast to his usual bravado. "This is your reality, Emeka. You've been cheating on me, lying to me, and treating me like I'm invisible. But I'm not going to stay quiet anymore. I'm done with your games." I could see the panic start to creep into his eyes. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "I'm going to make sure you lose everything, Emeka," I continued. "Everything you thought was yours. The mansion, the cars, the money. I built it all, and now I'm taking it back." The silence in the room was deafening. His face had gone from pale to red, his fists clenched, but there was nothing he could do now. The revenge I had been silently planning for so long was finally in motion. And this time I wasn't going to stop until I had one. The next few days were the quiet before the storm. I could feel the tension in the house, thick in the air. Emeka was no longer the confident man I had known. The arrogance in his demeanor had been replaced with uncertainty. But he wasn't going to give up easily. I could see it in the way he watched me, his eyes narrowing with suspicion, as though he was trying to figure out my next move. I wasn't in a rush to confront him directly. I knew better than to give him the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. No, I had my plan in place and I was going to follow through. The morning after our little confrontation, I went to the lawyer's office. I needed Chijioke to help me prepare the legal papers, the divorce petition, and most importantly, a demand letter that would force Emeka to face the consequences of his actions. I needed him to understand that this wasn't just a marriage falling apart. It was the beginning of his financial unraveling. Chijioke listened carefully as I explained everything. His focus never wavered, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Finally, someone was standing by me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back my dignity, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. "We'll file for divorce, but we're also going to ensure you have access to everything you're entitled to," Chijioke said, his voice firm. "I'll make sure that Emeka doesn't get away with this. It's time for him to face the truth." I smiled for the first time in days. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now it was directed toward a goal. The legal system would be my weapon. As I left the lawyer's office, I called Ngozi. She had been my sounding board, my support throughout this process. "I've done it," I said, barely able to contain the excitement in my voice. "The papers are in motion. We're going to make him pay." Ngozi's voice crackled with pride on the other end. "That's what I'm talking about. It's time he learned a lesson. You deserve better than him." But despite my newfound confidence, I could feel a gnawing sense of unease. Emeka wasn't going to let me take everything without a fight. He was a proud man, and this would devastate him in ways I couldn't even predict. Sure enough, the next evening, Emeka came to me, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can destroy me?" he hissed. "You think you can just walk away from this marriage and take everything I've built? You're nothing without me. You're nobody." I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "You're right about one thing, Emeka. I am nothing without you. But what you fail to understand is that I've been building myself for years. I was always the foundation, always the one behind the scenes, making sure everything you have was possible. You didn't even notice when I quietly took control of everything." His face twisted in disbelief, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then the anger flared up inside me again. He had humiliated me, disrespected me. This was my chance to show him who I really was. "I'm taking what's mine, Emeka," I said, each word cutting through the air like a knife. "The mansion, the cars, the business, everything. You've betrayed me, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you truly are." For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me, his fists clenched, his face turning red with rage. But then, just as quickly as the anger appeared, it disappeared. "I'll fight you for everything," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "You won't get away with this." "I'm not trying to get away with anything," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm just taking what I'm owed." And with that, I knew the battle had truly begun. The days that followed were a mix of silence and tension. I could feel the walls closing in around me, but this time I wasn't afraid. Emeka's threats had no power over me anymore. He could yell, shout, or throw things, but deep down he knew what I had already set in motion. His world was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. At night, I would lie awake, listening to the faint sounds of him pacing the house, plotting his next move. But he didn't realize that I was 3 steps ahead of him. I had already contacted my family, the people I trusted most, and informed them of everything that had been happening. They were ready to support me. One evening, I sat down with Ngozi again. I needed her input, her advice, her perspective. I had been so focused on taking everything from Emeka that I hadn't fully thought through the emotional toll this would take on our children. "I know you want to make him pay, but what about the kids?" Ngozi asked gently, her concern evident in her voice. "What will they think when they find out? You've been the strong one, the one holding everything together for them." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words hitting me. I had been so focused on getting back at Emeka that I had ignored the potential fallout on our family. I had to find a way to balance this. I couldn't let my children suffer because of his mistakes. "I'll make sure they're okay," I said, my voice soft but determined. "But he needs to understand that he can't keep treating me this way, not anymore. He needs to learn that actions have consequences." Ngozi nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew how deeply I loved my children, how much I wanted to protect them from all of this. But I also knew that if I didn't do this now, Emeka would continue to walk all over me. The next morning, I took the first step. I called Emeka into the living room. I had been waiting for this moment, for the right time to finally have a conversation with him about what was really going on. He came in, his posture stiff, his face still carrying the remnants of last night's rage. But this time I was ready for him. "Sit down," I said firmly. "We need to talk." Emeka shot me a look, his eyes narrowing. "What is there left to talk about? I'm not giving you anything. You think you can just walk away with my life, my money, my reputation? You've already given me everything, Emeka," I replied calmly. "You've given me the strength to take back what's mine, and you've given me the right to finally be free from you." I could see the realization flicker in his eyes. The facade he had so carefully built over the years was starting to crack. "I won't let you do this," he spat, his voice low, dangerous. "You already have, Emeka," I said, my voice steady. "You've already lost. I'm just putting the pieces in place now. Your lies, your cheating, your manipulation. It's all coming to light. You're the one who pushed me into this corner. Don't act like you didn't know this was coming." There was a long, tense silence. For a moment I thought he might break down. But instead, he stood up, shaking his head in disbelief. "You'll regret this," he muttered before storming out of the room. But I didn't regret it. Not for a second. As the days passed, Emeka's desperation became more apparent. He started reaching out to friends, trying to manipulate them into siding with him. But each time I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let him tear me down again. Not after everything he had done. I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. But this time, I wasn't fighting for his approval, his love, or his forgiveness. I was fighting for myself, for my freedom, my dignity, and my future. The court papers were filed. The lawyers were involved. And Emeka had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. The battle was just beginning, but I was ready. It had only been a week since I filed the divorce papers, but it felt like a lifetime. The weight of what was happening had not fully settled in my mind. I had taken a stand, and though I felt empowered by the decision, I couldn't ignore the constant anxiety that swirled in my stomach. Emeka's pride was no small thing. If I was going to fight him, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Each day that passed, the tension grew. Emeka kept his distance, but his presence lingered like a dark cloud. He didn't speak to me directly, but I could feel the shift in the air whenever he was around. He was planning something. I could see it in the way he stared at me with a mix of hatred and confusion. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Ngozi. Emeka is trying to destroy you in the press. He's spreading lies about you, saying you've been hiding money, that you're unstable. Be careful. I could feel my blood run cold. A public smear campaign was something I had feared from the very beginning. Emeka was the type to fight dirty, and I had underestimated just how far he would go to maintain his reputation. I called Ngozi immediately. What do you mean he's spreading lies? Why would he do that? Because he's terrified, girl. He knows if you win this, he's finished. His career, his status, everything gone. He's a prideful man, and this is the only way he knows how to fight. I felt a surge of anger. Emeka had always cared more about his reputation than anything else. To him, image was everything, more important than his own family. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a war. Over the next few days, the media storm hit. The headlines were full of Emeka's accusations. Wife hides assets, claims she's entitled to mansion. Business tycoon's wife accused of financial deception, and mysterious divorce. Emeka's shocking allegations. I could hardly believe it. The lies were bold, crafted to make me appear as the villain in our marriage. But I wasn't about to let him get away with this. I called Chijioke, my lawyer, who assured me that the truth was on my side. He was already working on a counter-response, gathering evidence of Emeka's infidelities and financial misconduct. But even as he reassured me, I could feel the pressure mounting. This was turning into something far more dangerous than I had anticipated. I couldn't stay passive in the face of this. Emeka had dragged my name through the mud, and now it was time to clear it, once and for all. A few days later, I received a phone call from an old friend, Sandra, who worked in the media. She had always been supportive, but this time, she had something important to tell me. Emeka is reaching out to journalists, offering them stories about you. He's trying to turn people against you, making it seem like you're unstable, like you're just after his money, Sandra said, her voice laced with concern. My heart sank. I know. He's doing whatever he can to destroy me, but it won't work. I'm not going to let him. I've already put a plan in place, Sandra continued. I'm going to help you get the truth out. I'll make sure that everything he's doing comes to light. We'll show the world who he really is. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Sandra's help was the lifeline I needed. With her connections, we could finally fight back in the public eye. This was the turning point, the moment when Emeka's lies would be exposed for what they truly were. Later that evening, I gathered the kids and tried to keep things as normal as possible. They could feel the tension in the air, and I knew they were worried. But I refused to let them see how broken I felt. They needed to see their mother strong and unyielding. Emeka had underestimated me, and now it was time to flip the narrative. I would fight back not just for myself but for my children. They deserved to know the truth. They deserved to see that no matter how dark things got, I would never back down. The next day, I contacted a trusted journalist who had worked with Sandra. I had a meeting scheduled with him to discuss how to set the record straight. This was it, The moment I would take control, the moment I would take back everything Emeka thought he could steal from me. The next few days felt like a game of chess. Every move I made, Emeka countered with another act of defiance. But this time, I wasn't the one retreating. I had the truth on my side, and the more he tried to tarnish my name, the more it only exposed the cracks in his carefully built facade. The meeting with the journalist was a turning point. I sat across from a seasoned reporter named Tund, someone who had always been reliable when it came to uncovering the truth. He listened intently as I told him my side of the story, but I wasn't just telling him my feelings. I had the proof, messages, recordings, even photographs that confirmed Emeka's many lies. He couldn't hide behind his wealth and influence forever. "You've got everything you need, and I've seen enough," Tund said, his eyes scanning over the documents I handed him. "This isn't just a marriage falling apart. This is a story about power, control, and betrayal. And the world needs to know about it." The fire inside me burned brighter than ever. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about justice. It was about showing the world who Emeka truly was. A man who used his charm and wealth to manipulate everyone around him, including the woman who had loved him the most. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "Let's expose him for who he is. I've had enough." The very next day, Tund's article hit the newsstands. It was a bombshell, everything I had said, backed up by the evidence, exposed for the world to see. The headline read, "Tycoon's ex-wife reveals web of lies, infidelity, and financial manipulation in explosive divorce." I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as the story spread across social media. The lies Emeka had planted about me were now being exposed for the world to see. The scandal of his cheating, his emotional abuse, and his reckless spending habits were now on full display. People started talking, sharing their own stories of betrayal, of toxic marriages, and of women standing up for themselves. Emeka's phone rang off the hook. He was trying to get ahead of the story, calling his lawyers, his friends, anyone who could help him regain control of the narrative. But the truth was already out there. I watched the chaos unfold from the comfort of my living room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Emeka had no control over this anymore. Later that afternoon, Emeka showed up at the house, his face red with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. He barged into the living room without knocking, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you've won?" he spat. "This isn't over. I'll make sure you regret this." I didn't flinch. "You don't get to make threats anymore, Emeka. You've lost everything. The public knows who you are now." He took a step forward, but I held up my hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You don't scare me anymore. I'm not afraid of you." He hesitated, his expression faltering. He knew I was right. He had underestimated me, and now the truth was like a sword that had cut through his defenses. "You're pathetic," he muttered under his breath before turning to leave. "I'll make sure you never see a dime of my money." I watched him leave, but this time, I didn't feel the same pang of hurt that I had felt in the past. I felt relief. He could threaten me all he wanted, but it didn't matter anymore. He had lost. The following weeks were a whirlwind. I continued to work with my lawyer to secure everything I was entitled to: alimony, child support, and a share of the assets we had accumulated during our marriage. Emeka's attempts to fight back were weak. His lawyer's threats were empty. The more we fought, the more I realized just how much power I had regained. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for my future, and for the future of my children. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from Chijioke, my lawyer. "We've secured a favorable settlement, and Emeka has agreed to the terms. He's giving you what's fair, and the divorce will be finalized next week." It was the final blow. Emeka had been forced into a corner, and he had no choice but to accept the reality of his situation. The public humiliation, the legal battle, it was all too much for him. As I hung up the phone, a sense of peace washed over me. The battle had been long, and it had been hard. But I had won. I had fought for my dignity, for my children, and for the life I knew I deserved. And in the end, Emeka's lies had only exposed his own weakness. The truth had set me free. The days following the final settlement were a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. Emeka had agreed to the terms of the divorce, and the public fallout had already done its damage. His business associates were distancing themselves, his friends were quiet, and his reputation, which he had so carefully built, was now in tatters. But none of that mattered to me anymore. The only thing that mattered was that I had finally found peace. As I settled into my new routine, my children adjusting to the changes as well, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Emeka had tried to control everything. Our marriage, our money, even my future. But in the end, he had lost. Yet, despite all the signs pointing to his defeat, I knew Emeka wasn't going to give up without one final attempt to reclaim control. And as much as I tried to enjoy my victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was planning something. One night, as I was tucking the kids into bed, the doorbell rang. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart skipped a beat as I made my way to the door. When I opened it, I found Emeka standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. "Emeka? What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. His eyes were wild, as if he hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice shaky. "You don't understand. I can't lose everything like this. I've worked too hard for all of it." I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "What do you want, Emeka? It's over. You don't get to come back into my life now. I'm begging you," he said, his voice almost pleading. "I can't lose the mansion, the cars, everything I've built. You don't understand what this is doing to me." I stared at him, disbelief creeping into my chest. "You think I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? After everything you did to me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood there, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "I'll do anything, just please don't take it all. I'll give you whatever you want. Just let me keep my dignity. Let me keep something." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emeka, the man who had humiliated me, belittled me, and taken everything for granted, was now begging for my mercy. I thought about his words for a moment. There was a time when I would have felt sorry for him. But not anymore. Not after everything he had done. "No," I said firmly. "You lost your dignity the moment you threw me into that pool. You lost everything when you decided that your pride and your lies were more important than me." He staggered back as if the words had physically struck him. His face twisted in rage, but I wasn't scared. I had nothing to fear anymore. "I'll make you regret this," he hissed, before turning on his heel and storming off. The anger in his eyes was the last thing I saw as he disappeared into the night. I knew then that he wasn't going to let go easily, but I also knew that there was no going back. The next few days were filled with silence, except for the occasional threatening message from Emeka. He was trying to intimidate me, but I had no intention of backing down now. I had already won. His desperation was just the final proof that he knew it too. Then, I received a call from Chijioke. "It's done," he said, his voice calm. "The divorce is final. The settlement is in your favor. Emeka's attempts to regain control will fail. You're free." For the first time in what felt like forever, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Emeka was gone. The money, the mansion, the business, it was all mine now. But more importantly, I had my peace. I had my freedom. Days turned into weeks, and the dust finally began to settle. The house, once filled with tension, now echoed with the laughter of my children. We were adjusting to our new normal, and although the scars of the past were still there, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in years. It was as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Emeka had vanished from our lives, or so I thought. But then, just when I thought the nightmare was finally over, he returned. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was in the middle of preparing dinner when I received an unexpected phone call. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name flash across the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Emeka? My voice was steady, but there was a slight tremor in it. I had learned not to expect anything good from him, but I still braced myself for whatever he was about to say. Do you really think you've won? His voice was cold, dripping with the same arrogance he had always carried. You've made a huge mistake, and I'm going to make sure you regret this. I clenched my fists, the anger rising again. You can't intimidate me anymore, Emeka. You lost. It's over. You think I've lost? He scoffed. No, you don't understand. I've been working on something that will change everything. You'll see. I knew he was trying to rattle me, but I wasn't falling for it. I don't care what you're planning. You have no control over me anymore. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice tinged with something darker. We'll see about that. I have something up my sleeve that will turn everything around. You won't know what hit you. With that, he hung up, leaving me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. What was he planning? What could he possibly do that would change the outcome of everything? The fear I felt was fleeting, replaced quickly by determination. I had already won this battle. Emeka's tricks, his games, were no longer my concern. But deep down, I knew he wasn't going to give up without a fight. It wasn't long before the news broke. Emeka, in one last attempt to salvage his reputation, had filed a lawsuit against me. He claimed that I had manipulated the divorce settlement, that I had hidden assets and betrayed him in ways I hadn't yet revealed. The accusation was ludicrous, and I knew it. But the way he spun it, with his connections, his money, it made it look convincing to the outside world. He wasn't just fighting for his wealth. He was fighting to control the narrative once again. He wanted the public to see him as the victim, the man who had been wronged by the woman he had loved, the woman who had taken everything from him. This was the final blow, and it came with the full force of everything Emeka had left. But this time I wasn't afraid. I called Chijioke immediately, and we discussed our next move. Emeka had crossed the line, and now it was time to expose him for what he truly was. A man who would do anything to maintain his image, even at the cost of his own dignity. Don't worry, Chijioke reassured me. We've already gathered enough evidence to counter his claims. He's just grasping at straws now. The truth is on our side, and this will be his final attempt to save face. Let's turn this around, once and for all. I nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the future of my children, for my own peace of mind, and for the truth. I wasn't going to let Emeka destroy me. Not this time. As we prepared for the next round of legal battles, I focused on what truly mattered. The house, the cars, the wealth, it no longer held any significance to me. What mattered was my strength, my resilience, and my ability to rise above the chaos he had created. I had come too far to let him take it all away from me. The courtroom was filled with an air of tension, the silence thick enough to suffocate anyone who wasn't prepared. Emeka, once so sure of himself, sat across from me, his eyes flickering with a mixture of frustration and defeat. His lawyers whispered among themselves, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage his crumbling case. The evidence was overwhelming, too much for him to deny. I sat with Chijioke, my lawyer, feeling a calm that had eluded me for so long. This was it. The end of the long battle, the final confrontation where the truth would finally be acknowledged. I could almost feel the weight of the years of pain, betrayal, and humiliation being lifted from my shoulders. Emeka had used every tactic in the book: smear campaigns, public accusations, threats. But none of it worked. The more he tried to paint me as the villain, the more the truth came to light. He couldn't escape the facts anymore. The judge entered the room, and everyone stood in respect. As I sat down again, I could feel my heart pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. Today, the truth would win. The proceedings were straightforward. Emeka's lawyer attempted to spin his accusations one last time, but each claim was easily shot down by Chijioke, who presented the evidence of his infidelities, financial mismanagement, and attempts to manipulate the divorce settlement. The lies had no ground to stand on. The final moments came when the judge, after reviewing all the evidence, turned to Emeka. "It is clear from the evidence that you have acted in bad faith throughout this process," the judge said, her voice firm. "Your claims are without merit, and the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Your last name. The divorce settlement will stand, and the court will ensure that all financial obligations are fulfilled." I could feel my chest tighten as the judge made her ruling. The gavel fell, signaling the end of this chapter in my life. Emeka slumped in his seat, his shoulders heavy with the realization that he had lost. The room was silent as the judge wrapped up the proceedings, but in my mind, I was already celebrating. I had fought for my dignity, for my future, and most importantly, for my children, and I had won. After the session, I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high. I was free. The chains that Emeka had tried to bind me with were gone. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The worst was behind me, and now it was time to focus on rebuilding. The victory wasn't just about money, property, or revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about standing up for who I was and proving to the world that I could not be broken. Emeka's final attempt to regain control had failed, and in the end, it was his own actions that had destroyed him. I didn't look back as I walked out of the courthouse. I had no reason to. The next few days were filled with a sense of relief. I focused on my children, making sure they felt loved and safe in this new chapter of our lives. We began to create new memories, free from the shadows of the past. The house, now mine, felt like a sanctuary, a place where we could heal and move forward. Emeka tried reaching out a few times, his messages filled with guilt and anger, but I ignored them. I had nothing left to say to him. His time in my life was over, and I wasn't going to let him drag me back into his world of lies and manipulation. I had learned so much from this experience about strength, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what's right. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized that the true victory wasn't just about the settlement or the mansion. It was about reclaiming my peace, my power, and my future. I was free, and I would never allow anyone to take that from me again. The weeks that followed the final court ruling felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in years, I felt truly free from the constant pressure of trying to please Emeka, free from the weight of his lies and manipulation. The house, once filled with tension and anger, now felt like a safe haven. Every corner of it was a symbol of my resilience, a reminder of how far I had come. The children were adjusting well. They had always been my source of strength, and I made sure to prioritize their well-being above all else. We spent more time together, going on walks, playing in the garden, and simply enjoying each other's company. There was laughter in the house again, the kind of laughter that had been absent for so long. But as much as I wanted to enjoy the peace, I knew there was still work to be done. Emeka's presence, though distant, still loomed over us. His attempts to continue his smear campaign had failed, but his ego wouldn't allow him to give up. I had to make sure that I protected what I had worked so hard to rebuild. I wasn't going to let him destroy this new life I had created for myself and my children. I spent a lot of time with Ngozi discussing the next steps. "You've done it," she said one afternoon, her smile wide as we sat in the living room, sipping tea. "You've rebuilt everything from the ground up, and you're stronger than you've ever been." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. It doesn't feel like rebuilding, though. It feels more like starting fresh. Like I'm finally living my life the way I've always wanted to. "You deserve this," Ngozi said, her voice sincere. You've earned every bit of happiness that's coming your way. And don't let Emeka or anyone else tell you otherwise." I nodded, taking her words to heart. Emeka had tried to break me, but instead, he had created the opportunity for me to rebuild my life on my own terms. I was no longer defined by my marriage to him or the life he had wanted me to live. I was free to create my own future, and that was something I would never take for granted. One evening, as I was sitting in the garden, watching the sunset with the kids, I reflected on everything that had happened. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also been empowering. I had learned that no matter how much someone tries to tear you down, you always have the strength to rise again. I looked at my children, their faces full of joy, and knew that this was the life I had fought for. A life of peace, love, and freedom. A life where I could be the woman I had always been meant to be. I had learned that sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most beautiful transformations. And now I was ready to take on whatever came next. The future was mine. Months passed, and life continued to blossom in ways I never thought possible. Emeka's presence had faded from our lives, like a distant storm that had passed, leaving only the calm in its wake. Despite his efforts to hold onto the remnants of his former life, he was no longer a part of my world, and for the first time, I felt like I could truly breathe. I spent more time focusing on my children, their futures, and the new opportunities that awaited us. With the settlement in my favor and my freedom secured, I was able to invest in the things that mattered most: our family, our well-being, and our future. I hired a tutor to help the kids with their studies, enrolled them in extracurricular activities that would help them grow, and most importantly, I gave them the time and attention they deserved. They had been through so much already, and now it was time for them to feel the love and stability they had been denied for so long. But while things were settling down, my heart wasn't fully at peace. It took me some time to realize that, despite everything I had accomplished, I was still carrying the emotional weight of the betrayal. The scars were healing, but they hadn't completely vanished. Emeka's actions had left a deep mark, and although I was rebuilding my life, there were still moments when the pain crept back in. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. I thought about the woman I had been when I first married Emeka, the woman who had believed in his promises, in his love. And then I thought about the woman I had become, the woman who had fought for her dignity, her peace, and her freedom. I had come so far, but I knew there was still more work to do. And that's when it hit me. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't about revenge, or the mansion, or the wealth. It was about forgiveness. I didn't need to forgive Emeka for him. I needed to forgive him for me. Holding on to the anger, the hurt, the bitterness, it wasn't helping me. It was only holding me back from moving forward. I reached out to Ngozi, sharing my thoughts. "I think I'm ready to let go of the last bit of pain," I said. "It's time to forgive him." She was quiet for a moment before speaking softly. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself. You've already won. But forgiveness is how you truly heal." I let those words sink in. I wasn't going to let Emeka have any more power over me. He had already taken so much from me, but I wasn't going to let him take my peace. So I made the decision. I would forgive him, not for him, but for me. I would let go of the last remnants of anger and resentment that I had been holding on to, and I would finally be free. The next day, I sent Emeka a message. It wasn't long, but it was heartfelt. "Emeka, this isn't about us anymore. I've moved on, and I'm building a life for myself and our children. I forgive you for everything that happened between us. I hope you find the peace and happiness you've been searching for. Goodbye." I hit send, and for the first time in years I felt lighter. That was the final step in my healing process. The moment I forgave him, I truly freed myself from the past. Emeka had no more hold over me, no more power to hurt me. As the months continued to pass, I saw the changes in myself and my children. We were happy. We were whole. We were stronger than ever. The road to healing had been long, but we had made it through together. Looking back, I realized that this journey wasn't just about standing up to Emeka. It was about standing up to myself. It was about realizing that no one could define my worth but me. I had the power to rebuild my life, to rise from the ashes of betrayal, and to create a future filled with love, peace, and joy. And that was the victory I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Thank you for following this journey. Do you believe in the power of forgiveness? What's your take on Emeka's downfall? Hit like if you think forgiveness is the key to moving on. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below.